Dear Sánchez-Costa, we are happy to greet you in the frameworks of the project Challenges of Source Evaluation in Science and Correlated Areas. And since currently you are the head of the, you are the director of the project Cultural Historica, which unites different scholars and presents a large amount of materials, we would be happy to hear about the history of such an interesting project and the goal.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Nice to be here. Okay. Well, this project started in 2009 with my father. He were catedrático, like a full professor of early modern history in Universidad de Barcelona, and he was very interested in historiography and theory of history and historical culture as well. Historical culture is a concept which defines more or less the dissemination of culture in, not just the dissemination, but how culture is represented in the media. In the media, in movies, in literature, in comics, in whatever means, no? And historical culture is all this the footsteps of history in the media, no? and in art as well. Well, we started this project 10 years ago with some professors, just the two of us, with some professors, and we start to incorporate these texts and to make a list of historical novels, historical movies, and all of that. And then the project started to grow. It has no commercial purpose, just to disseminate history, to show the web in the project has two sides, no? The academic part, the scholarly part, and the common person part, no? To the scholars, we offer 1,000 texts, almost 1,000 texts, papers, most of them, but also conferences and interviews and about all kinds of historical topics. Above all, theory of history, historical culture, yes, but a whole range of topics. And then we have the common man or the common woman part, which is the historical film, historical novel, images, photographs of history, and we are currently trying to expand that part, okay, to reach more people. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Well, this is a very important cause, very important project, I guess, because history is that very field that allows us to understand who we are, to understand the world, and as saying goes, people that do not learn the examples, the lessons of the history, it is always behind that. I mean, it's very important to know the lessons of history.
Yes, that's true. My experience is that I work in the whole range of humanities, literature, art, history, and a bit of philosophy also. But my experience is that most of the people are most interested in history. History is the science, or at least the scholarly discipline, which fascinates more the people in the humanities. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, Dr. Sánchez-Costa, since your expertise, as you have said, in comparative literature and humanities as well, so could we take a look at the following questions? Does the current amount of secondary sources overshadow the primary sources?
Well, that's a good question. We live in a world with so much secondary sources. You know, in George Steiner, which died a few months ago, which I love him very much in academic terms. He spoke in Real Presence in his book. He dedicated a chapter to the secondary city. And what did he call the secondary city? Well, this world of class dominated by secondary and parasitic sources. No? works of exegesis, criticism, commentary, analysis, footnotes, recensions, paraphrase. This universe saturated with text about text, no? Secondary sources, usually expendable, ephemeral. He called this that we live in the Byzantine period or the Alexandrian. Well, I suppose that living you in Ukraine, you know very much, no, the Byzantine context, no, and all the time talking about the past and about other authors' works, no. But in the Byzantine period, they lacked creativity. They spoke, for example, in medicine, they spoke a lot of Galenus, they spoke a lot on Hippocrates, but they didn't invent anything, no? And, it's not a criticism of the Byzantine culture, which is great. It's just that we live in a world which, we have every day more commentaries on commentaries of the text, no? And we this is also promoted by this politic of or publish or perish, no? That all the universities are urging people to publish a lot in some journals, no? And the humanities research is trying to imitate the scientific fields, no? Is it science literature? Is it philosophia science? Well, in a sense, yes, but not the same. No, it's not an accumulative science. Present book of philosophy could be worse than Aristotle's, for example, and many times it's worse. Sometimes could be better as well, but it's not the same. No, and the humanities is trying to imitate the science, and it is trapped in this circle of in this circle which is of publishing. No, publishing above all. Publishing most of the texts in most of the papers in humanities are never quoted. Never. I mean, they have very few readers and never are not quoted at all. This is the statistics, no? In psychology, in medicine, the thing in economics, the things are very different. But in humanities, that is the thing, no? And just to end that question, no? My answer. Well, as George Steiner and many other people say, and we need to focus more on the primary sources, which is the books, the works of art, of music, of that in the humanities field at least. I can't speak on economics or other fields, but I may speak on humanities. The primary sources. For example, why so many texts on El Quijote, for example, or War and Peace by Tolstoy, or Two Cities by Dickens, and why so few people read the original books, which is the most important thing. No, we need an immediate, a personal encounter with those works, with aesthetic creation, a personal involvement. We need to interact. To risk the transformation of ourselves. I could watch, a movie by Tarkovsky, and I could be very moved, and it could be a transcendent experience, like an epiphany. It could be. I have to risk myself to be transformed. But if I only read commentaries of the text, it's like I have a lot of barriers, and I can't never experience the transformation process that could initiate a really masterpiece. No? Mm-hmm. Well, that's it.
Dr. Sánchez-Costa, so if we are speaking about today's world, not the past, not about Aristotle, not the Plato, in today's modern world, does the authority of an author guarantee that the source is reliable?
Great question as well. Sometimes I would say that not so much the authority of the author, but of the publisher. you know, if and of course it's not a 100% rule, but if I read a book printed in Oxford University Press or Cambridge University Press or I don't know Pearson Education, all these great publisher houses, no, you know, the author could be wrong, and I can be in disagreement with him or with her, but I know that at least it has some meaning, no, and at least it is in a way the great publishing houses, and I'm not speaking in terms of quantity, but in terms of quality, the most prestigious university publishing houses or academic publishing houses actuate as a filter. They work as a filter, and they in the papers is the same. No, if I see a paper published in one of the most prestigious academic journal, I could be sure that at least this has some transcendence, some importance. I could disagree, I could agree, but this author is not a clown. No, it's not you know, a poser or a person who is trying to, I don't know, to speak of nothing. No? And in a way, that would be my answer. No? And of course, aside from publishers, some authors have credibility and others don't. No? One other question, of course, is where this author works. You know, we all know that there could be a bad professor in a great university, or there could be a wonderful professor in a bad university. Because luck and a lot of things could influence, no? But normally, if I have had the experience all the time. When I read a book by a Harvard professor or a Stanford professor or the University of Hong Kong, or I don't know, these Cambridge, Oxford, these great universities, they always blow my mind. not always, but usually. I understand, well, this is a genius, no? They are not genius all, but many times, no? And for that, I would answer that there are some criteria that could help us to understand how confiable is a source, how reputable is a source. One is the publisher, and the other is where does this professor work. If it works in a great university, well, I could disagree, he could be wrong or she could be wrong, but at least she or he has something interesting to say. No? If not, he or she won't be tenured and won't be working there.
Mm-hmm. So if we are speaking about research, and not just a hobby, but about academic research, could you please tell what kind of sources and literature can be used, for instance, in the historical research? And can be literature used as a source in an academic research? Yes,
it can be used, and it has been used a lot. Because sometimes the difference, now we could talk more of that, but the difference between history and literature is not so clear. No? And well, history is not only political and socioeconomic history. There are more fields. History is not only structures, not only facts. History is also human beings. Well, not also, but above all, human beings living their lives, feeling, working, trying to love, trying to make a living. History is about powerful man and woman, but it's also about the common man, no, and the common woman, and everyday stories. In history, we have to. History is not made only by conquerors or by great politicians or by, I don't know, great industrial people. No, there are a lot of a multiplicity of voice, no, or of interpretations, And for all that, literature is a great source. For example, if we look at the letters of Cicero, Cicero, no? the great Roman politician and lawyer and all that, we can understand the late Roman Republic much more, even better than reading Julius Caesar, the Bello Gallico, which is a great work as well. But the letters of Cicero, which is a work of art, of literature as well, there's dozens of people living there, no? Living there, explaining there, talking there with their own voices. And for example, if we read the Song of Roland, the Chanson de Roland, the medieval epic poem of French, the great French medieval epic poem, Chanson de Geste, we can understand the reign of Charlemagne. Of course, this is not all facts. We know there is a legendary text with some fictional additions. We know that, but at least we can grasp the spirit of the time, the spirit of the epoch. No? For example, the Giovanni Boccaccio de Cameron, which was written in 1353, just during the years of the Black Death. Now that we are immersed in coronavirus, well, we in the prologue of that book, which is a collection of stories, we can understand at least, or try to understand how the Florence people lived the Black Death, and what is more meaningful, some statistics of how many people died in Florence during the Black Death, or the pages of Boccaccio. Well, I would say that both are meaningful. No, it's not a dilemma. No, we don't have to choose. But we can pick both. We can pick both. And history is facts, history is numbers, history is statistics, but history is also living souls. No, is human beings trying to, or for example, the essays of Montaigne. They submerge us in the Renaissance period, no? in the religion wars in France, in the discovering of America, and how a French lord could think of the cannibals, for example, in the Caribbean islands, or violence or torture of war, or friendship. How does he experience friendship, which is so meaningful for us that for them, no? Or just to say the two last examples, no? Jane Austen, Charles Dickens. Well, they could speak for us so well of 19th century England, of the Industrial Revolution, of the class differences between the rich and the poor. It's a history document as well as a literary document, no? And we can enjoy all the novels or poems or essays, but we can learn a lot from them. A lot of history, a lot of sociology, a lot of philosophy, a lot of how they think and live and love and life and love. No? Mm-hmm.
Dr. Sánchez-Costa, when we speak about humanities as a field, what do you think makes a scholar? What he should do to be considered as such? What are the criteria of a real scholar? In here, like on post-Soviet era, humanities scholar would be considered as a scientist. So this scientist is used even for him, but I know that in the US or probably in Southern America, scientist is used for more exact sciences such as physics and chemistry.
Mm-hmm. Well, in Spanish we call académico, no? Académico, which is derived from academia. Well, the scholar or académico, above all, is a person which is fascinated by knowledge, no? By knowledge. He likes to learn and to communicate what he has learned. And for me, to be a scholar, of course, you have to be attracted by knowledge, or even to be in love for knowledge. But also you have to be creative. you have to create. If a person reads a lot but is not able to understand, to make wisdom of all that knowledge, and to distill wisdom from all those books, for me, is not a scholar. A scholar, it has a passive, in a way, a passive thing, which is to read and to research and to document things, but also an active part, which is creative, which is to expand the knowledge. If you are not able to expand the knowledge in some field, in some works, you are not a scholar.
So, if we take a look at the example, a historical topic, let's say a historian is trying to understand the factual history of Spanish civilization, let's say. What kind of sources should he be using? I mean, what sources would be priority for him? If he is trying to understand the factual, the real history of Spanish civilization, let's say in 17th century, what shall he do?
From Spanish civilization, well, the 17th century is part of what we call the siglo de oro, no? One moment, sorry. One moment. Okay. The siglo de oro, the golden century in Spain. Cervantes, El Quijote was written in 1605, 1615, and Calderón de la Barca and Lope de Vega, and we have a lot of Góngora, Quevedo, great writers. No? To understand this, from a historian, to understand this this period, well, literature is one thing. You could look at literature, but also you could look at art, for example. All the paintings by Velázquez, for example, and Zurbarán, and if you go to the to Museo del Prado in Madrid, you could understand a lot, much better, no? Much better this time. And of course, you have, for example, all the historical documents themselves, which is the main source, of course. The historical documents, you have the Relaciones de Indias, the chronicles of the people who go, of the conquistadores, of the people, some priests, some military people, some civil politicians that went to America and lived there, no? And you have the coins, for example. You have the seals, you have so many the medals, so many historical sources. No, of course you have the economic registers of finances. For example, Cervantes, he worked during some years just raising money for the Armada Invencible, for the war expedition to England, no, that failed. But you have. For example, the registers of, I don't know how you say, bautismo, the first sacrament of the church when someone is born. No? Well, you have those registers, for example, in the parish, and in a sense, for me, the good historian is able to merge a lot of sources from different places. No, of course the economic, the finance, the politicians, the diaries, the letters, the coins, the seals, the literature, the art, the scientific discoveries of that, the debates, the dialogues, well, all of that.
I have a question. Since you have listed different sources by now, different art, literature, archives, visuals, so do you think you are looking into the history, visual sources such as photographs, such as things that we can see basically, maybe old rare books, or even the architecture, would visual sources be more important and more reliable than text sources such as literature, or no?
Well, the image sources are wonderful, and they could tell us so much. Of course, that depends on the era. No? From mid-19th century onwards, we have photography. From the 19th century, more or less, we have cinema. No? And cinema it explains so much. For example, if you want to understand the Nazi Germany, Leni Riefenstahl documentaries are wonderful. The Triumph of the Will, 1934, Olympia, 1936, I think, from the Olympiads of Berlin. No? And those are documentaries made by a Nazi director, a woman, Leni Riefenstahl, which was very, very talented and very, very ideologized, no, as well. No? Or for example, in the Soviet Union, Potemkin, no? The films or the 19th Revolution, no? or all these films, no? Well, it is so powerful images that many people has utilized it. Utilize it from the very beginning. For example, just to put an example, an old example, Octavius Augustus, the first Roman emperor, Octavius Augustus, he utilized very, very well images in the coins, in sculptures. He filled all the Mediterranean with hundreds of sculptures of him, always young, always healthy, always beautiful, much more beautiful than he were in the real life. No? And he used the triumph arcs. I don't know. No? Many testimonies, artistic testimonies. He utilized, for example, this is literature, no? But Virgil's Aeneida, just to promote himself. No? But Mecenas, the word Mecenas derives from a minister of Augustus, which he was the first that started to pay the art people, the artists, just to promote the emperor ideas. And yes, image is very, very powerful. And just another example, which did the most to end the Vietnam War? Some statistics, some numbers, or the photos of the dead soldiers arriving in the U.S. Or, for example, the famous photo, no, of that little girl burned by the napalm, nude, no, just running, absolutely dramatic. This absolutely pathetic photo, no. A photo could end the war. Or, for example, some years ago, in Europe, we have had the problem of immigration. Well, all these immigrants arriving in Lesbos, in Greece, and possibly you remember the photo of this poor little boy, being in a Lesbos beach, just died. And it was a very sad photo, and it did a lot to conscience people. Well, it's a very debatable thing, no? How we must manage immigration, but photos move conscience. The rhetoric sometimes is defined, the rhetoric, as the art of making images present in memory. Being able to make images present in memory. And there are images that are unforgettable, and this is difficult the same with graphics or with maps or with tables of numbers. I'm not minimizing the importance of numbers and quantitative things, but I'm just pointing out the importance of images. An image in Spain, we have a saying, I think it's the same in English, no? An image speaks 1,000 words. No? Right. And yes, that's true. That's most of the time true.
And the last question would be related to free encyclopedias. I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, more and more scholars these days are using Wikipedia as their starting point for the research. It is also used a lot as a tool of students, I guess, at the universities and even at the schools. So how would you comment this current state of affairs related to using Wikipedia as a starting research point?
Well, Wikipedia is sometimes denigrated by professors. They say, many scholars say that Wikipedia lacks scholarly, how you say, for example, it is not peer reviewed, okay? and they say that Wikipedia is a very fluent thing. Anyone can edit this, and that's true. And that for this reason, it's not very recommendable. It's not very. It's not a solid source. I disagree with them. I disagree. Of course, Wikipedia it has its limitations, and you have to know how to use it. Of course, but Wikipedia is very, very useful for students and for professors alike. Let's be clear. Let's be honest. How do we understand things that we don't know anything about? From Wikipedia. You know, I always say my students that Wikipedia is the first step. It never could be the ending. It never could be the last thing we know about something. But many times it's the first thing we know about. If I don't know. I want to I read in a book the name of an Ukrainian king, for example. I will go to Wikipedia. I will go to Wikipedia to search. Of course, my knowledge can be is not good to be to leave the things there, but it's many times. And for me, just to summarize, for Wikipedia is the first door. It's a door, it's a window that connects us to a whole range of knowledge. And Wikipedia has a lot of links, has a lot of quotations, has a lot of bibliography, of web recommendations, and many times it is the first occasion to know something. And in my understanding, Wikipedia has great quality. Of course, there are. In Wikipedia, I would distinguish two different kinds of topics. No, the topics that are very contested, politically contested. Well, in that sense, Wikipedia is troubling. No? Because, for example, if you search about Franco, for example, in Spain, which is until today, there's a lot of polemics and. Well, or for example, Lenin. I'm sure that the Lenin entry is very contested in Wikipedia. But if in those topics, well, you need caution, no? In Wikipedia. But when you look for things that are not very contested and are not very polemic nowadays, the information is 99%. I don't know, many times very well crafted and very good.
Well, thank you very much for the interview. It was a pleasure to hear your viewpoint, since you're a scholar in humanities and now managing such an important project as Cultural Historica.